The secrets California doesn't want you to know about San Quentin. The silence behind the walls. Before we begin, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because the story you're about to hear was almost buried forever. And someone out there doesn't want you to know what really happened behind those prison walls. The morning of June 4th, 2017, began like any other along the quiet shores of San Francisco Bay. Fog rolled over the water, wrapping the skyline in a pale, gray hush. But across the bay, inside the stone fortress of San Quentin State Prison, something was wrong. At 5:42 a.m., a correctional officer radioed in a code nobody had heard in decades, Code Black. It wasn't for a riot or a fight. It was for something far worse. In cell block C, an inmate named Marcus Lee, serving a life sentence for armed robbery, was found dead, face down on his bunk, hands neatly crossed on his chest, and a folded letter resting on his pillow. The letter simply read, "They promised freedom. Instead, they buried the truth." The words sent a chill through every level of the prison's hierarchy. Marcus wasn't just another inmate. He'd been working as a confidential informant for the state. The deal was simple. He'd supply information about drug trafficking inside the prison, and in return, he'd get a sentence reduction. But that deal, as investigators would soon learn, had gone terribly wrong. Detective Alyssa Grant, a seasoned investigator with the Marin County Sheriff's Department, was the first to arrive. She'd seen murders, riots, and suicides behind bars, but this scene was different. Marcus's cell door had been locked from the outside. The cameras facing his corridor had gone dark at 3:07 a.m., and the prison logs showed no guards on duty between 3 o'clock and 3:30. It wasn't just a murder. It was a message. As Grant studied the crime scene, she noticed something odd. Underneath Marcus's bunk, taped to the underside of the frame, was an old, yellowed Polaroid. The image was faint, blurred, like it had been taken decades ago. It showed 3 men in prison uniforms standing beside a massive hole in the ground. Behind them, something dark and metallic jutted from the dirt. Stamped on the bottom corner of the photo were the words, "Project Echo, 1984. No one at San Quentin had ever heard of it. When Grant took the photo to Warden Harold Benton, he froze. His eyes, usually sharp and commanding, turned uneasy. "That photo shouldn't exist," he said quietly. "Where did you find it?" Grant pressed for answers, but Benton deflected. He claimed Project Echo was an internal training program long discontinued. But his tone said otherwise. Later, she discovered that Benton had requested the prison's camera footage from that night be deleted, an order that came less than 2 hours after Marcus's body was found. The deeper she dug, the stranger it got. Prison archives had no mention of Project Echo. No records, no personnel files, not even a memo. Yet, one thing stood out. In 1984, the same year stamped on the Polaroid, a massive lockdown had occurred at San Quentin after an industrial accident in the Lower East Wing. It was never reported publicly. And every surviving guard from that year had since retired, disappeared, or died. 2 days later, Grant received an anonymous email. The subject line read, "You're looking in the wrong place." Attached was a single file, a scanned copy of a confidential state document, stamped with red ink. Classified, property of the California Department of Corrections. The text was brief, half-redacted, but one sentence stood out. Project Echo was authorized for subterranean expansion beneath Cell Block D. Purpose: undisclosed. Contractor: Redwood Infrastructure. Beneath Cell Block D. Grant's heart pounded. That area had been closed for years, sealed off after a structural collapse in the late 90s. Or so everyone believed. She requested permission to inspect the lower levels, but the warden refused. "Unsafe," he said flatly. "No one goes down there." But that night, Grant found a way in. With the help of a maintenance officer named Reed, she accessed a forgotten corridor behind the boiler room. The air was thick with dust, and the hum of old generators echoed through the concrete halls. Rusted gates, locked doors, and warning signs lined the walls. When they reached the bottom of the stairwell, Reed pointed to a door half buried in rubble. A corroded metal plate was bolted beside it. The faded engraving read, Echo. Access restricted. Grant's flashlight flickered as she pried open the door. The stench of decay hit instantly. The tunnel beyond stretched deep underground, colder than ice. There were old chains bolted to the walls, a shattered camera lens embedded in the ceiling, and on the floor, a metal tag, half covered in dust. She picked it up and wiped it clean. It was stamped with an inmate ID number that didn't exist in any modern database. Then she saw it, a stack of dusty folders on a desk, each marked with a single word in black ink: volunteers. Before she could open the first file, a sound echoed from behind her. Footsteps. Slow. Heavy. Coming closer. Reed turned, his flashlight trembling. "Who's there?" he shouted. No one answered. Then the lights cut out. Total darkness. Grant could feel someone standing just inches away, breathing softly. A faint whisper broke the silence. "You shouldn't have come here." When the power flickered back, Reed was gone. The desk was empty, and every trace of the folders gone with him. Grant stumbled out of the tunnel, gasping for air, her pulse racing. By morning, she filed a report. But the warden's office claimed no record of her visit, no logs, no camera footage. Reed's name didn't appear in the employee registry. To the department, he didn't exist. And by the end of the week, Detective Alyssa Grant was placed on administrative leave for unauthorized access to restricted areas. But before turning in her badge, she received one final text from an unknown number. It contained a single image, the same Polaroid she'd found under Marcus's bed. Only this time, one of the men in the photo had been circled in red. And beneath it, a message that made her blood run cold. "He's still inside." The vanishing files. The night after her suspension, Detective Alyssa Grant sat alone in her dimly lit apartment overlooking the fog-choked San Francisco Bay. The city lights shimmered in the distance, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that someone, somewhere, was watching her. Her badge and gun lay on the kitchen counter, stripped of authority, but still heavy with purpose. The text still glowed on her phone. "He's still inside." But who was he? Marcus Lee's killer? Someone tied to Project Echo? Or worse, one of the men in that Polaroid? She couldn't stop staring at it. The image was old and grainy, but the circled face haunted her. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, and wearing an old-style correctional officer's uniform. His expression wasn't one of control or dominance. It was fear. 2 days later, Grant's former partner, Detective Ryan Cole, reached out in secret. He'd seen the internal memo about her suspension and wanted answers. They met at a diner off Highway 37, the kind of place where the coffee was stale and the walls had seen too much. Cole leaned forward, voice low. "They wiped your file clean, Alyssa. The report about the tunnel?
Gone.
Even your badge ID is showing as inactive since last year. It's like someone hit delete on your entire record." Grant clenched her jaw. "What about Marcus Lee?" Cole hesitated. Autopsy came back. Cause of death: heart failure. Official story says natural causes. Grant's eyes narrowed. He was 38. Cole nodded grimly. "I know, but there's more." The coroner's report disappeared the day it was filed. And the tech who entered the data, he resigned yesterday. Something deeper was unfolding, something powerful enough to rewrite history with a few keystrokes. That night, Grant broke one of her own rules. She went back to the source. Using a friend's security clearance, she accessed California Department of Corrections' internal database from a borrowed laptop. When she searched Project Echo, nothing came up. But then she noticed something odd. A hidden index tag buried in an unrelated file labeled archive_84_Eastwing. When she opened it, lines of text scrolled across the screen. Subterranean expansion approved. Operatives assigned. Subject transfer complete. Volunteers secured via population control directive. Testing successful. Containment remains classified. And at the bottom, a redacted signature. H. Benton. The warden. Grant's pulse spiked. He'd been there since the 1980s, longer than most of the staff. The photo, the hidden tunnel, the sealed records, all of it pointed back to him. Before she could read more, the laptop froze. Then the screen went black. A single pop-up appeared. Unauthorized access. Connection terminated. Her hands shook. The system had traced her. Moments later, her apartment lights flickered. A car engine idled outside. She killed the computer, grabbed her phone, and slipped out the back door into the alley. Rain began to fall, thick and cold. A black sedan was parked across the street, engine running, headlights dimmed. She disappeared into the shadows. The next morning, Grant met Cole again, this time at a storage facility in Oakland. Inside, he showed her what he'd found, an unmarked evidence box retrieved from a forgotten storage shelf at the Marin County Sheriff's Department. Inside were photographs, dated June 1984, stamped San Quentin, restricted access. The first image showed a line of inmates in chains, walking into a concrete chamber beneath the prison. The second showed a massive steel door, engraved with the same word she'd seen underground, echo. And the third, grainy but clear enough, showed one of those inmates lying on a table with medical instruments surrounding him. Jesus, Cole muttered. This wasn't construction. This was human testing. Grant's stomach turned. On inmates. Cole nodded slowly. On volunteers. Or at least, that's what they called them. Alyssa flipped through the photos until one detail made her freeze. A face. Faint, blurred, but unmistakable. The same man circled in red in her Polaroid. Only this time, he was lying on the table. She turned the photo over. Someone had scrawled a note in pen. He didn't die. They moved him. Hours later, they drove north toward the prison. Grant knew they'd never get through the main gates, but she remembered the service tunnel near the bay, the same one she'd used before. They reached it at midnight. The tide was low, the air thick with salt and decay. With flashlights in hand, they crawled through the narrow, rusted corridor. As they descended, the air grew colder. The tunnel opened into a cavernous room lined with concrete walls. Old machinery lay broken, wires dangling from the ceiling. In the corner stood a row of large, metal storage units. Grant wiped away the dust from one. Property of California Department of Corrections, Project Echo. Cole pried one open. Inside were dozens of confidential inmate files, some dating back to the 1970s. Names. Mugshots. Each stamped with a word in red. Experimental. Grant pulled one out at random. The inmate's name. Darren H. Cole. She froze. Cole's eyes widened. That's my father's name. Grant handed him the file. Inside were medical reports, signatures, and photos, his father's prison record, dated 1984. But the file ended abruptly with a single note. Subject transferred to Echo Unit, status. Undetermined. Cole stumbled back, whispering, My mom said he died in a fire. He never came home. Grant's flashlight flickered again. She looked up. Fresh footprints led deeper into the corridor. Someone else was down there. They followed the tracks until they reached another sealed door. On the ground lay a stack of new folders, clean and untouched. The names were different, modern. Inmates still serving time. Grant's voice trembled. They're still doing it. Before Cole could respond, a shadow moved behind the glass window of the door. A figure stepped forward. It was the same man from the Polaroid, older now, face worn but unmistakable. He placed a hand against the glass and mouthed 3 words. Help me escape. Then the alarm started. A red light flooded the tunnel. Metal doors began to close one by one. Cole shouted, We need to move now. As they ran, the last thing Grant saw was the man pounding on the glass, his voice drowned out by the blaring sirens. When they finally reached the exit and burst into the open night air, she turned back, only to see the tunnel's metal doors slam shut forever. Behind them, in the faint echo of the sirens, one sentence repeated through the speakers like a recording. Project Echo is now secured. The buried truth. The night air outside San Quentin was eerily silent after the alarm stopped. Detective Alyssa Grant and Ryan Cole crouched by the fence line, their lungs burning, mud coating their hands. The fog rolled in from the bay, wrapping the prison in a ghostly shroud. They'd escaped, but barely. And as the tunnel sealed behind them, so did their only proof of what they'd seen. Cole's hands trembled as he held his father's old inmate file, now soaked in rain. He was alive, Alyssa. That man, that was him. Grant shook her head slowly. Ryan, your father would be in his 70s. I don't care, he said, voice cracking. They did something to them down there. You saw it, the files, the rooms, the equipment. Grant's mind raced. Project Echo wasn't a legend. It was a secret buried beneath layers of government silence. And someone wanted it to stay that way. 2 days later, they met again in a motel off the I-80, far from the city. The room smelled of cigarette smoke and damp carpet. Alyssa had barely slept, haunted by the image of the man behind the glass, his face pale, his eyes desperate. Cole had been digging into his father's record, tracing connections through prison transfers, medical memos, and state budgets. What he found chilled them both. Project Echo wasn't just an experiment. It was a program. A state-funded operation that began during the overcrowding crisis of the 1970s. Its goal, test psychological and biological rehabilitation methods on violent inmates. But the files showed something darker, neurological manipulation trials designed to control aggression, erase memory, and even alter personality. The line that stuck with Alyssa most was one buried in a 1985 internal memo. Subject response stable. Aggression reduced. Long-term side effects unknown. Recommend continued observation under isolation. Cole stared at the document. They didn't rehabilitate them, Alyssa. They rewired them. Grant rubbed her temples. And if they're still doing it, he finished her thought, then there are prisoners right now who have no idea what was done to them. That night, Grant received a message from an encrypted number. Meet me. I have what you're looking for. The address was in San Rafael, a few miles from San Quentin. Against her better judgment, she went alone. The building was an abandoned shipping warehouse near the water. Inside, the air was cold and heavy with the smell of rust. A single desk lamp glowed in the center of the room. A man stepped from the shadows. It was him. The same man from the Polaroid, from the tunnel, the one who'd mouthed, "Help me escape." Up close, his face looked stretched between decades of survival, his skin pale, his eyes darting. You shouldn't have come here, he said quietly. Grant froze. You're supposed to be dead. He nodded faintly. I was. In 1984. What is Project Echo? She demanded. He looked around, as if the walls themselves might be listening. It started as a behavior modification study. But the real project wasn't about rehabilitation, it was about control. They took inmates, stripped their memories, reprogrammed them, and reintroduced them into the population to monitor results. Grant's stomach turned. You mean they released them? Yes, he said. Men who couldn't remember who they were, what they'd done, or what they were capable of. Some were placed in witness protection. Others joined the military. A few became guards themselves. Grant stepped closer. Why are you telling me this now? His hands shook. Because it's happening again. They moved the trials off-site to medical research labs under private contracts. And they're using inmates from other states now. You think California stopped? They just outsourced it. Grant's phone buzzed. Cole was calling. Before she could answer, headlights flared through the broken windows. Multiple cars pulling up outside. The man's face went pale. They found me. Who? She asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he handed her a flash drive. Everything you need is here. Names, dates, facilities. Don't trust anyone in uniform. And, if you want to find the truth. He looked her dead in the eyes. Follow the transfers. The door burst open. Armed men in black uniforms stormed in. Alyssa dove for cover as gunfire shattered glass. When she looked back, the man was gone, dragged out by the men. She escaped through a side window, sprinting into the fog. The next morning, the warehouse was empty, no bodies, no bullets, no evidence. Just the faint smell of burned paper. Cole met her in a diner hours later. She handed him the flash drive. Together, they plugged it in. Inside were thousands of files, documents from the Department of Corrections, medical test results, prison transport logs. At the bottom was a folder titled Active Personnel. When they opened it, Grant froze. Her own photo stared back at her. Underneath her name, Psych Evaluation, Phase 3, Integration Successful. Cole looked at her, confused. Alyssa, what is this? Her voice cracked. I don't know. Then another realization hit her. The man in the Polaroid, the one who'd warned her. He wasn't just a victim. He was her handler. Before she could speak, the lights in the diner flickered. Every screen went black. Then a message appeared across all of them, white text on gray. Project Echo terminated. Data compromise detected. The flash drive sparked, then burned out at her hand. Weeks later, Alyssa Grant was gone. No record. No file. No trace. The official report said she resigned and left the state. But Ryan Cole never believed it. He went back to San Quentin one last time, staring at the cold waters of the bay. As the sun dipped behind the hills, he noticed a new section of construction. Fresh concrete, new security fencing, and a sign that read, Facility Expansion, California Rehabilitation Initiative. He whispered to himself, Echo never died, it evolved. Behind the fences, faintly through the wind, he could swear he heard something, a rhythmic sound echoing from beneath the ground. A heartbeat. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Hit subscribe, because the secrets only get darker from here.